Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming. Very important time for Georgia. How would you assess the importance of the upcoming parliamentary elections in Georgia? And what's the focus of Georgia's Western partners, namely the EU, Germany as the president, as the partner of Georgia, and as the president of the European Council?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here at Radio Თავისუფლებtoire. These elections are obviously very important because they follow on changes to the constitution that have changed the electoral system. So there are better chances for smaller parties to be represented in parliament. And all embassies, including the ones you mentioned, are observing the electoral campaign and are observing the activities of parties very closely.
As for the observation and monitoring of the election process and pre-election period, how many election monitors are planned to be sent by Germany to Georgia for these elections, and does the COVID pandemic affected their numbers?
Mm-hmm. As for Germany, we will send the usual contingent of observers. This will be around 37 persons. This is our aim, and we are recruiting them and forming the team right now. The first observers will arrive in just a couple of days, and then more will arrive at the end of October. I hope that we will have a full ODIHR observer mission with well above 300 observers, so that this election can be duly monitored.
Very good to hear that, because that's very important for the process itself. Yesterday, the European Parliament adopted a resolution on implementation of EU-Georgia Association Agreement. There is a paragraph on political dialogue and parliamentary elections. Does its interpretation of the March 8 agreement coincide with your view of this dialogue and its consequences? I can read the quote from the resolution. The Parliament welcomes the implementation of the March 8 agreement and President Zurabishvili's decision of 15 May to pardon two imprisoned opposition leaders, an important step towards easing tensions. Calls on all parties in this regard to honor both the letter and spirit of the agreement and to fully implement all aspects of it, namely to ensure that all elements of electoral reform are translated into the constitution and the law and implemented, and that all outstanding cases of politicized judicial processes are resolved without delay. You were criticized quite severely for your comment on the March 8th agreement about Georgi Rurua's issue. So does this interpretation coincide with your view of the process?
Well, I'm very happy that the European Parliament recognizes the March 8th agreement, takes note of it. This agreement was translated into the constitution and the electoral
yes,
law.
Already. Yeah.
The aspect about removing political pressure on the judicial system, I believe, is not limited to this election or to the present period, the days and weeks we live in, but is a constant task. And this is how I understood the March 8th agreement. This is something that political parties, most of all institutions in Georgia, but also international partners have to look at for the long term, and that includes the European Parliament.
So not only Rurua's case, because I know the interest towards this particular case, but it includes Georgi Rurua's case and the several potential politicized cases too.
I have not heard this name mentioned, neither in the European Parliament resolution nor
not in the resolution, but
in
EP members quite often mentioned him. So let's go. Are all the recommendations fulfilled already? As for the legislative changes, I mean.
As for the legislative changes, they are fulfilled, and the election is taking place on that basis, which creates better opportunities for smaller parties to be represented.
What do you see the main challenge in this pre-election period before the election day comes. There
well,
was polarization mentioned in this particular resolution, for instance.
We know that the political environment in Georgia, the political landscape is highly polarized. Given these circumstances, which are known for a long time, I think the electoral campaign has started well. Many parties are participating, they're putting forward their programs and candidates. And maybe this is subjective, but in my view, there has been less personal polemics than, let's say, in the early stages of the presidential election in 2018 that I also witnessed. There are some cases that give reason for concern. We know about the poster of the Alliance of Patriots that had an anti-Turkish drift. There have been violent incidents in Tbilisi, in Akhalkalaki. These are the sorts of things that could damage the image of an election campaign. But I'm very happy that a code of conduct has been signed by the parties.
Is being signed.
Well, most of them have signed already, and further parties are still coming on. I do hope, and I call upon the parties to sign it and to adhere to this code of conduct.
The European Parliament calls on Russian Federation to fulfill its obligations under the EU-mediated ceasefire agreement of 12th of August 2008. Notably to withdraw all its military forces from Georgia's occupied territories and allow the EUMM unhindered access to the whole territory of Georgia. What do you think are the additional steps the EU should take for helping this to happen?
Well, indeed, the 6-point agreement of 2008 has not been fulfilled for already 12 years now. We all know the situation. Unfortunately, the list of points on the agenda with Russia grows longer and longer. In the meantime, we have had the annexation of Crimea, we've had interference in the Donbas regions of Ukraine. We have had many cases of criminal attacks on people in European countries. So all these things give reason for concern, and when we have discussions with Russia, the list of acrimonious points is very long. There is a discussion on sanctions, obviously. Maybe we will come to it in more detail, and everything has to be seen together in context. But Georgia is very much part of these concerns.
You mentioned sanctions. Let's continue with that issue then. What are the perspectives of the additional sanctions towards Russia, which concerns Belarus, Navalny's poisoning case?
On Belarus, there are very concrete, not only discussions, but decisions being taken in European institutions. And there will be a sanctions list of Belarusian officials who have taken part in the repressions. This is a very strong sign by the European Union that this type of repression after a falsified election essentially is not acceptable in Europe today. In 2014, I witnessed the situation. This was before I was posted to Moscow. There were international discussions about sanctions, and sanctions were taken in a coordinated way by the European Union, the United States, and other partners. And I think this is the way in which sanctions have the best effect.
Until I go to the German-Russian relations, I would like to continue in the framework of the European Union. President of the European Commission, German lady, Ursula von der Leyen, made a speech at the European Parliament. And she said, the people of Belarus must be free to decide their own future for themselves. They are not pieces on someone else's chessboard. To those that advocate closer ties with Russia, I say that the poisoning of Alexei Navalny with an advanced chemical agent is not a one-off. We have seen the pattern in Georgia and Ukraine, Syria and Salisbury, and in election meddling around the world. This pattern is not changing, and no pipeline will change that. Do you share the view that Russia's president's active opponents poisoning Russia's position on Belarus' internal political processes should give some kind of impetus to a new politics towards Russia for Germany, even put under question implementation of the pipeline? The President of the European Commission mentioned of Nord Stream 2 project.
The new policy on Russia started in 2014 when we adopted sanctions together with our international partners. And a couple of weeks later in Moscow, I could convince myself that these sanctions came as a big surprise to the Russian leadership. They had not thought that such a joint action by Western partners was possible. In the meantime, various countries have imposed different sanctions on Russia. In Russia, the saying goes that we will be under sanctions anyway for one reason or the other. So the government is trying to create a sense of indifference. I hope that the Russian people understand that these sanctions are aimed at the behavior of their government, of their leaders, which do not shy away from all sorts of illicit actions internationally and in various countries.
But still, do you expect any important shift in Germany's relations with Russia? And did I miss the issue of Nord Stream 2 pipeline project? To be under question.
I don't know why.
Because I know there is some kind of pressure in Germany towards the government. Yeah.
There is always a discussion about Nord Stream 2. Internationally, I don't quite understand why the wide issue of sanctions and economic relations with Russia is always reduced not only to the field of natural gas, but more narrowly to one of the many pipelines through which this gas might come. There is sometimes a commingling here of economic and business aspects, of competition aspects, and political aspects also. But as you know, there is a discussion also on the Nord Stream 2 project in Germany. I think at such a time and faced with such behavior, all reactions are on the table. In 2014, we decided not to impose an international boycott on Russian products, oil and gas. But maybe the time is coming closer when we should think about that.
Finally, I will return to Georgia and its elections. Russia as one of the challenges in the context of these parliamentary elections. Do you see it? Do you see it clear?
Everybody knows that there is Russian propaganda around the world in many countries, in every country. It exists also in Georgia. I have not seen anything in particular in the last days and weeks, but the election campaign has only started, and we should continue to observe this closely. The case of the alliance of patriots and their alleged financing from Russia is before the State Audit Commission, and if the Audit Commission finds reasons, it will go on to the prosecutor. So this would be a concrete case.
So you will follow the process?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
For me too.